revenge, sin, legacy, hope, food, erasure, history, genocide. These thematics and everything else you hear have created the infrastructure, the very blueprints of what we've come to know as Kagurabachi. Yet the story begins with its world already formed. We've come to learn the consequences of one man's action, but never of their origin. This channel has made great effort to map out the structure of the Sate War, but that won't be necessary anymore. I'm a few weeks late, but now it finally begins. It's a new dawn. It's a new day. It's a new life. And I'm feeling good. Manga is home to some of the most beautiful artwork that fiction has to offer, while many, including me, gaze in awe at rambunctious double spreads made on a weekly, back-breaking schedule. Sometimes it's the more calmer, sinister single pages that really captivate the reader. Okazono has come to master this page style, even adding outlined framing to not only symbolize a literal art piece being hung up on a wall, but to really hammer home the difference between a regular moment and something more crucial. The Sate War begins big and bombastic with a title drop featuring Kunishige and company doing stupid shizzle like teenagers ought to do. We needed these few chapters of breathing room, silly antics mixed with some still thought-provoking lore, symbolism, and honest-to-God gut-wrenching characterization like Kunishige's starvation and lack of connection to the real world, because those times are fleeting. The word of the year is dramatic irony. Every line of dialogue, every smile stings your very soul, because we all know what their current selves look like. Far from their egotistical youths, there's always a looming sense of anxiety, attempting to leverage every interaction not to cause trouble, and using violence only as a last resort. War changed these people to their core, and getting to witness that slow yet painful process of smiles turning to sadness, kindness turning into cold-heartedness, and Akamura losing the spark in his eyes is just horrible. It's torture to the viewer, but in the best possible way. So let's talk about it. Welcome to Politics Bachi, where every ethical dilemma exists on the grayscale. Before the meteor struck Earth and the dinosaurs went extinct, Okazono held an interview where he described the structure, nature, and progression of the Kagurabachi story. Without escalating into plot specifics or revealing too much of his hand, he made a concise effort to clarify that this series is a human versus human story. Questions then rose when in chapter 72, the Shokoku people emerged from the sea. More than that, they were described as savage, brutal, and almost animalistic. But that has to be propaganda, right? Well, we can look to Yura for the answer. He served and will continue to serve as a borderline objectively correct narrator, for even now, all of his claims regarding the Sate War hold true to a T. Human beings are individuals. After all, you'll have good and bad, child and elderly. And while we caught a fourth wall breaking glimpse of the innocence in Shokoku, this chapter gives our first look into the evil that lies within. Meet the Mikaboshi, the Starkin. Like most, it's best we begin with the name analysis. Written fully in kanji yet specified in katakana, we're dealing with an ateji, a word that disregards meaning for the reading. This makes it clear that the name itself, rather than the characters, should be of focus. And lo and behold, the Nihon Shoki, a record of all Japan's history, mentions this very name once. But in order to make sense of this lone passage, I need to explain something first. The Kojiki and Nihon Shoki are records compiled by the Yamato court in the year 700. While its contents are mostly history, they had certain objectives to fulfill. 1. Legitimize imperial rule. 2. organize all folk and popular myth into one recording. And 3. Ensure that its readers understand that all gods obey the imperial ancestor Amaterasu. And because of the third point in particular, any gods that did not yield to Amaterasu were seen as rebellious, chaotic, some even call them outright evil. Mikaboshi is mentioned in an excerpt that concerns the Kuni Yuzuri, a mythological event in primordial Japan's history where transfer of the land was taken from the Kunitsukami, kami who dwell in the earth, to that of the heavenly order, Amaterasu, who would then after be known as the roots of the imperial family. To begin this process, gods were sent down from heaven to subdue the living Kunitsukami, and they succeeded mostly. While many were subdued and most accepted the proposal and its heavenly order, Mikaboshi did not. And so says the passage. Suini, jashin yaku saki, ishinoru yotsu batsushi, kaisude ni heitei shita. Yuitsu shitagawanu mono wa, hoshi no kami, kagase o Mikaboshi. While you can immediately draw parallel to transfer over land and the family legacy bolstered by the image of Izanami, that is to say, the partial creator of Amaterasu, what interests me most is the theoretical side of this story. Since Japan is known as the land of the rising sun, befit of its Amaterasu image, and Shintoism echoes strongly throughout the whole land, historians strongly believe that the star god was a form of religious rivalry, one that tried to drag down the image of Amaterasu, the imperial family as a whole. After all, most of these legends were then used to push political propaganda and to demonize everything that falls out of scope. And when you look at Kagurabachi, legends used to paint certain narratives are something we've seen before, haven't we? Murky, dark arms reaching for the bright, beautiful phoenix, that is Seiichi Samura. Kanryu Yoshida had his life saved by him, and so those experiences would reflect in the painting's biases. So as you look at this stunning ukiyo-e depiction of the Heian period, keep that in mind. A heroic Jikishin Soga being jumped by a demonic Mikaboshi. Panels never exist solely on a two-dimensional scale, and I'm confident we'll meet the painter of this piece as well. More than likely, someone on the Soga payroll or a member of the clan as a whole. But why insects? More specifically, why insects for someone associated with the stars? To start off, we already established that the Mikaboshi are viewed as Kunitsukami, associated with the overworld. But Mikaboshi, due to their heavenly attribution, were also regarded as a kind of god of chaos. I went into greater detail in a prior video about how insects, plague, and Abrahamic religions are all linked to the malediction, but the gist is that they are unpredictable and swarm-like in nature. Which brings me to the fact that Akemura looks suspiciously like the demonized Mikaboshi, yet he's part of the Soga and is given the Magatsumi. My only assumption is that the two clans lived in pseudo-harmony before their battle began and were part of the same tribe or culture. Kagurabachi introduced early on the concept of waging war because you're different, yet because of that, the Sate War was to be interpreted as a literal inversion, fighting someone because they're far too alike. And without further ado, let's talk about them. If you aren't interested in design philosophy, thanks for watching, we'll see you next week. Because we're going deep. Starting off with the background characters, none of them show their full faces. Immediately, we've entered a realm of reducing oneself to a tool, all for the sake of utility. Doesn't take a second longer to see how this is essentially the Masumi clan of the Shokoku. It immediately centers the culture's identity around usefulness, benefit, and giving way to that which is nobler, the hallmarks of a monarchy. Then there's the decent amount of religious imagery. From carrying medallions and Shimenawa rope on their outfits, the chapter already established that it's possible the Shokoku view the Datenseki as a holy, sacred relic. Once we get a deeper look into their environment, those visual motifs will become increasingly apparent. Similar to the Soga, they also holster a kind of oracle, someone who, just from this chapter's layout alone, is implied to have a similar kind of future sight to that of the Soga princess. This would explain explain how they were able to act preemptively, lull the Japanese into a false sense of security with discussion, and play them like a fiddle. And all of this serves to characterize the big man himself. I've been a vocal candidate that in order to truly understand the Sate War, we would need the perspective of the Shokoku people, who we now know to be descendants of the Mikaboshi. And who better to introduce us to that perspective than the very prince of its nation? Granted, I'm making the assumption based on clothing, but from the high-class collared jacket and the way in which he carries himself, this is a person of regal importance. The lost brother of Zodal, the missing twin of Crollo, a magnificent mixture between calm and collected and someone not afraid to exercise brute force. While a little unclear, the two escorts are completely torn in half from their body, which is all you'll need to personify this guy. The arm guards show that Shokoku royalty aren't to be treated as something to protect, but warriors worthy of honor. I long since imagined that their culture is built on status and achievements, and embellishing yourself in riches and disregarding all forms of tradition would fully support that idea. His eyes are identical to that of the Mikaboshi of old, and it implies that similar to the Soga and its branch families, the Shokoku too have their own, this one being a direct descendant. Now you can play eye roulette to see if any of the pre-existing Kagurabachi cast have those kind of eyes, and oh, doesn't look like it. The only characters in the series to have dyed nails are Uran and Hina, one of which is a terrorist while the other actively goes against social norms. It makes you believe a kind of idea that the Shokoku elite don't conform themselves to what mainland Japan sees as normal, and that is realistic considering they've had 1,000 years, 10 generations to cultivate their habits and environment. Back then, their land was taken from them, and for a millennia, that grudge has slowly pent up, generation after generation. What Akemura told Chihiro now makes a whole lot of sense. They were taught the same things. These Mikaboshi are ready to oppose the imperial family once again and attempt to take it all back with the force.